Irashaimase. Hello and welcome to Fataris' Kitchen. I'm your host, Chef Fataris. It's time once again for Shoot 'em Up Saturday, and on the menu this week we have Juno first. What kind of taste will it have? Let's get cooking and find out. From developer Konami, Juno First released to arcades in 1983. It would receive ports to PCs of the era and the MSX, but it did not receive any console ports. Jump forward to March of 2025 and it's now available for the PlayStation 4 and the Nintendo Switch as part of the Arcade Archives. This one is a simple, fixed shooter classic arcade title, something along the lines of Space Invader or Galaga, but with some more unique elements going on there. It's one that I've had a lot of fun with, but unless you're in the mood for a classic arcade title, it's one I have a hard time recommending, as if you found this title in an arcade, you might not put more than a couple quarters into it, so I'm not sure if the price is really justifiable for most gamers. But if you are in the mood for some classic arcade goodness, this one might just be the right taste. Finding ourselves back at the title screen, the game does support 1 or 2 players, however it's 2 players alternating, so that's something to keep in mind. From here, when you start the game, we're dropped into our field in our warp fighter. So this is a fixed screen shooter, however it does have a lot of movement options. So you can move left and right, but in addition to that you can also move forward and backward, and there's some neat animation on the ship when you do so. We also have a shot, and the shot is actually pretty awesome. So if you hold it down, you actually do get kind of a burst fire, but there's also the ability to turn on rapid fire in the emulator, and really I kind of feel like it's best to use kind of a tap fire technique with this particular title, but I would recommend trying whatever works best for you. Either rapid fire or tap fire would be my recommendation. So we do engage in wave-based combat against the enemies. So you have a certain number of enemies per wave. Once you defeat all the enemies in a wave, we get this bonus point screen and we advance to the next wave. So the rapid fire can actually be really useful for clearing out some of the waves very quickly, and we'll see that in the next one. But here in wave 2, we see that things are already starting to ramp up difficulty-wise. We're starting to get enemy shots coming at us. And if we happen to get ourselves into a pickle, one of the things that I think is really neat and innovative about this title is there's actually something kind of like a dodge mechanic. We have the ability with our ship to temporarily warp. So I'll show that off here after we finish up with our bonus section there. So what do I mean by warp? So if we have shots coming at us, we can use this warp, which temporarily blinks the ship out of existence. It also clears bullets in the area, so when you come back in, you're not going to instantly die. That's a great way to get out of some really difficult situations. However, you only have 3 warps per wave, not even per life, so you do have to keep that in mind. So here's wave 3, with the emulator's rapid fire turned on. We can make really short work of this wave. And move on to wave 4. So one of the things that's also interesting, and you'll start to go and see it kind of at this point, are the enemies themselves will sometimes mutate into more difficult versions. So you can see we already have one that's become this like a green one that's firing all these extra shots. We'll use warp to get out of there, and they kind of use a warp mechanic themselves. So in addition to the enemies that we encounter, there's sometimes these pod-like objects that will show up, and when you destroy that pod object, it leaves behind an alien. Destroy the alien, or not destroy, if you touch the alien, then you'll enter a bonus stage, or a bonus section rather, where for every enemy you destroy, you'll get progressively more points. In addition to that, the enemies stop firing at you. So it's something akin to, say, a power pellet in Pac-Man, where you're getting bonus points for each enemy you defeat, and you also kind of have a reprieve from the constant attacks of the enemies. The enemies themselves do have 2 shots that they fire at us. One is just kind of a standard like missile or shot, and the other is this kind of star-like homing missile, which, especially on some of the later stages, there are a lot that get flown our direction, and we have to watch out for those. That's one of the things that's really good to save your warps for, is when you have a large group of those shots coming in. So now we've collected the alien, we've got our little bonus section here. It's a great way to build up points really rapidly. At 100,000 points, you do get an extra life, so keep that in mind. I do like how you have that little warp mechanic going on there with the enemies in addition to your own ship when they mutate and when you warp there. And the animation when you die as well is actually pretty neat. So when the enemies do mutate, they'll sometimes mutate into enemies that are worth more points, so there's advantages there, but they definitely do get more dangerous. And there we basically have Juno first. So as I mentioned, the game does have some difficulty spikes. We're actually kind of getting to that point where things start to ramp up. Wave 6 is definitely doable, but Wave 7 is kind of where I start to hit a wall. I've gotten to the point where I can more consistently get through this one, but later waves are even more difficult. So that's my first major minus flavor for this title. It's just the sudden difficulty spike that we encounter at this point of the game. It definitely has kind of that arcade feel where the developer's probably like, alright, this is about the point where you need to put in another quarter, bucko. In addition to that, and this is more just a product of the era, but there's not really much in the way of music, which isn't necessarily a problem, but for some people it's makes for kind of a dull experience. But moving on to the plus flavors, so I really like the game's warped dodge mechanic that you have present, and also the way that it has you be really conservative with using those, only having 3 available per wave. And then ultimately, I feel this title is an incredibly excellent classic arcade title to just sit down and score attack. You're not going to be spending a whole lot of time with this one, so you're likely just going to sit down, bang out a few runs, try and get a new high score, and then maybe come back to it in a day or so, see if you've been able to go and improve on your technique. When you do get a game over, it takes you to the player initial entry here, and there are quite a few slots that will be displayed, 16 in total. Unfortunately, sometimes with the emulator, if you exit out in certain ways, it doesn't go and save all of them, which is a bit disappointing. But this one being an arcade archive title, there are online leaderboards, so your highest score will be posted to the leaderboards. So that's definitely great to see. And there you have it. Juno first, served up for your enjoyment. So, as I said in my introduction, this is one that I've had a lot of fun with so far. So if you're in the mood for a classic arcade title to kind of just score attack and kick back with and chill, then this is one that I think is an interesting one to try out. It's one that I wasn't familiar with, and I've had a lot of fun with my short time with it thus far. But also at the same time, if this kind of gameplay doesn't go and intrigue you all that much, then I think this would be an easy one to take a pass on. And with that, we find ourselves at the end of this week's episode of Shoot 'em Up Saturday. As always, we want to thank you so much for joining us. We hope you have a wonderful week yourself, and we look forward to seeing you again next time.